Got a guest today. Welcome to Duffus Meets. We have the one and only Max Cyrus in the building. Yes, Max.
How you doing, man?
Good, man.
Pleasure to be here.
This is a little COVID edition, man, of Duffus Meets.
Yeah.
So we're trying this out. So one of the concepts we're doing here is, as well as speaking to interesting people, is about showcasing sort of up and coming talent. And you're something that is you're a very talented individual.
Thank you.
So I've obviously known you personally for a number of years, but for those that are not familiar with Max Cyrus, I mean, he's a music producer, composer, songwriter, DJ, mentor.
That's it. All different things.
Yeah, man. So we're gonna get into some of that as well to kind of find out what you've been doing and give you an opportunity to plug some of your work as well. So with regards to say like your music career and background and stuff like that, so what's your earliest memory, like your earliest memory of getting like falling in love with music?
Okay, so I would say it would probably be my brother's record collection. So I grew up in an era where people would buy music and spend most of their time making their own, basically like a Spotify playlist. You would have bought like a cassette tape and taken all of your records and just compiled your own playlist. And my brothers, they were both quite submerged into music. So one brother, he was very heavy into buying records, and the other one, he was into dancing, like break dancing. So I saw both sides of the coin, from making music, so buying music, to people who like dancing to music. So I grew up in a household where like music was just like all encompassing. It was all part of one thing. So that was probably like my earliest memory. And then it kind of, I got very heavy into hip hop when I was at school, and then jungle music was born. And I feel like that is something that is so, you're lucky if you're born and able to be part of a music genre in its earliest creations. I think that's something that's so rare. It's so rare. But that was something that happened in my early years of trying to become a producer or a DJ. So yeah, that I would say, just I thought I can't live without music. There will never be a day where I'll be able to just do my thing without listening to music. It's not possible.
It's in the blood. You know?
It's in the blood.
So it's interesting. You mentioned about sort of like the jungle scene and all that, but for you, what came first, like the DJing or the music production side of it? What came first?
DJing, because my brother, he was linked with people who used to DJ on sound systems. So first thing was just trying to learn how to mix two records on turntables and blend the tracks in together. And that was probably like my earliest. One of my school friends, he then was an MC, because everything with a DJ, you had to have an MC. And then I think it would have been when I left school and was starting college, it was at that point where I was like, I want to learn how to make my own music. Didn't know how to use any of the equipment. And at that time, like jungle, drum and bass was still quite in its early years. So the key was to try and find a way of being around people who were making that type of music. And I was quite fortunate that I picked up the Thompson's directory actually and found a studio that then happened to be one of the biggest drum and bass labels, I would say, in the UK, I would say.
And what kind of age were you when you sort of started, when that transition happened? So when you started DJing and stuff like that, because I know you was doing stuff in clubs, you was doing stuff privately, you know, you was doing quite a bit. You was like doing your thing with an established record label. What sort of age were you when that happened?
Oh, 17.
Yeah.
I was 17. I remember leaving school, and a guy who now shoots videos for DEE, he was also wanting to learn how to make drum and bass. And we had a bag of samples and found a recording studio. And I was fresh out of secondary school. So, and at that time, I think just to add the knockback of it, the tunes not being good enough, made me then want to be a part of the industry, because it wasn't a personal goal. It was like, oh, okay, let's make a tune. But then the next goal was a DJ's got to play it. And then the people I heard who was in the jungle scene, who was DJing in clubs, it was like, well, if they're not playing a tune, then you've not succeeded. So there was always like a next level to excel. And I found that being part of a scene that was in its early embryonic years, everybody had the same aim and objective, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's something that I became quite passionate about, which is why I had to go and to start my own like record label and publishing now, which I'll explain a bit more later.
Yeah, so you went in obviously from the DJing, you went into like the music production stuff, and how did you find that transition?
I found it quite hard. It was exciting, but it was quite hard because obviously I'm going to sound a little bit like a perfectionist now, but the Serato, for me, it does it for you. Obviously it's another skill, but learning how to DJ on like direct drive from belt drive turntables, like if you never touched a pair of Techniques before and someone said take two tunes and mix them together, it was like throwing pots and pans in the kitchen for me at my first attempt. It was a lot of noise. It didn't sound like music at all, but it was quite hard. It was like, damn, you've got to put the hours in to learn how to, you know, it comes from here. There's, you know, you get to that point where it's like you pick up two records and you know where to find the BPM to make it work. And it's like your body clock becomes part of like the metronome with the music. And it's a totally different skill set than looking at a screen. And I found going from that skill set to then looking at a screen for samplers and mixing discs, that was a hard thing for me to transition to. But I wanted to learn a little bit of everything. Some people was happy just making tunes and people mixing them down and mastering them. But I wanted to learn a little bit more of how to do a little bit of everything, if that makes sense, which I think has helped me now with like today's technology and stuff.
So when it comes to like where you get your inspiration from in terms of like, your musical heroes and icons and stuff like that, what sort of musical influences, who influenced you sound-wise and artist?
Do you know what? Because of the soundtrack element and trying to get like emotion and feeling into what I do now with Max Cyrus music, Lalo Schifrin has got to be one of the biggest influences for me, because he done, you know, things from like Shaft to blaxploitation films to Enter the Dragon and Bruce Lee stuff. But his sound, he was very good at like drawing up pictures and emotions with sound. So it wasn't just your traditional kind of things like, you know, the Fatback Band and Gap Band and, you know, like Luther Vandross and James Brown and Michael Jackson and that the traditional soul element and hip hop element of things. But I also had like a massive love for people like Herbie Hancock, individuals that where I felt like they were the equivalent of today's Ninth Wonder, if that makes sense. Someone who is an artist who can stand on their own with or without the vocal element, like King Tubby. Do you see what I mean? Anybody who was able to kind of create something and it was like, okay, this is a great composition body of work with or without a rapper or a singer on it. Someone like the guys like Burt Bacharach. He could work with artists, but same time musically, I found people like them like really, really inspirational for me.
No, that's good. You kind of listed a collective of art there from different music genres, from sort of like the reggae dancehall background to then composers who've done music scores and stuff like that. And me on to your composing. So something that you've been doing perhaps in the last 3 years now, 2 to 3 years, totally different. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
So when I started Max Cyrus Music, I wanted to basically create like a UK version of Def Jam Records. and I hit some hard corners, to be honest, which is something that's it. I think it's really important to share. And part of that journey then put me in a position where my music was sitting more with people who were into creating and choreography. So I had an opportunity to work with a group of choreographers from Toronto and Montreal, and they wanted to put together like a piece which was based upon women who've done significant things in history and how their stories are like untold. And it's like, when you get into that world of composing, the difference between that and producing is you are working towards the movement. It's not so much a case that you're producing a piece of music and then someone is learning to create a dance piece to that piece of music. It's a bit more than that. It's like you're looking at the movement and you're thinking what instrument or sound works with the expression of what they're trying to portray. And I find it very, very, it's a great emotional journey, composing, because you are learning to have a relationship with the artist who's got another vision, and you try to make the two in alignment with each other. So yeah, it's taken me to a point where actually this week there would have been an international premiere in Stockholm for a piece I've got called Blue Monday with a crew from Barcelona. And it got picked up by a guy called Andy Margitston, who does short films for Nowness, which is a massive like arts channel. And yeah, unfortunately we're in a position where those things are cancelled at the moment. So right now I would have been in Stockholm for the first time ever, producing something that was taken to a screen dance festival for dance. And I found that with the composing, has took me on a journey where I felt music was more at when I was younger. So if there was depression or things like a pandemic or a civil rights movement happening or Holocaust at that time, anyone who was into like rhythm and blues or jazz, they were able to take the Great Depression and turn it into musical pieces. And now anyone who's working within the arts industry who's able to do that, that's something that the public kind of thrived off of, which is why when Dave had performance at the Brit Awards, it was like David Bowie, Bob Geldof, it was like that kind of Live Aid, Band-Aid thing, because, you know, people do want to see artists talking about what's happening in society more so. And I felt like I had more of a target audience and fan base of people who appreciated that I was trying to do that than just in the typical run-of-the-mill music scene of now, as starting as a label now. So that's some of the great challenges that I've come across or faced since I started the record label and publishing.
So let's talk a little bit about that. With Cyrus Music, you obviously have touched on it in terms of what the aim and concept was and is. Tell us a little bit more about some of the projects you've done, maybe people you've collaborated with, and all that kind of.
So Cyrus Music is a record label and publishing company, and I started it because I've got a vision of what I want to try and emulate, what Russell Simmons has done. But in terms of the fact, I felt like with the digital age now, record labels and publishing is quite, not a lot of people their knowledge isn't as high. Some people don't know the difference between being an independent artist and being unsigned, because there's a massive difference. And with today's social media networking, some individuals think that they are actually an independent artist, but reality is you are unsigned. If you don't have publishing, or you haven't got your own publishing, or you're not registered with the Performance Rights Society, and you're not fully functional as an independent artist, you are actually unsigned. But it can make you feel like you are in control of your own destiny, and then kind of mixing that up with being independent. So as Cyrus, as an artist myself, I'm signed to my own publishing company and record label. And what that has done is it's put me in a position where major documentaries or TV channels are able to take the music that I make and put it on TV. Because if it's not commercially viable, the major channels in the industry, they can't take it. So I kind of sat down with some people who work at Metropolis, with like Stormzy and Jess Glynn, and did some really good consultation work with them. And it was like, do you know what? This is the best way to do it, because it means that you're in control of your own artwork, you're in control of your own visual musical work, but you're in a position where you can work on major projects. So at that point in time, a rapper artist introduced me to Rodney P, and I was able to take a track I had called Untitled and get it on a documentary called The Hip Hop World News, which was it was fantastic. And it just goes to show how things work in the industry. I took it to a management company, and he was like, this is a bit lazy. The track's just called Untitled. It's not even been named. And then a producer for the documentary took it to America, and they interviewed Russell Simmons, and he was like, that's a great piece of music. So then the BBC said, we'll take the track. 6 months later, Kendrick Lamar brings out an album called Untitled. Same people who said it was lazy, they then jumped all over the fact that he had an album called Untitled. So it just goes to show the Pepsi Challenge is, it proved my point. I wanted to not have any gatekeepers that were stopping me from releasing music, because when I was in the drum and bass scene, I found that if you weren't in that elite group, it could give off the image that you're not talented, your music isn't good enough, it's not worthy of being played unless certain people are playing it. But the nepotism in the scene is that people have their favorites, and then it left less room for people to explore new artists. And how that then went on to affect the industry is, unless your music is commercially viable, most daytime radio DJs, they wouldn't even touch your tracks. Whereas before, I used to grow up listening to Groove Rider and Fabio on Radio 1, and they were given the freedom of playing any track from any artist who could have been signed to a major drum and bass label, to whether they just started their own company, and it just was more about the music. I then went on to produce a track called I'm Trying, which the instrumental I've now gone down that Ninth Wonder route, and I've put that out on Spotify today. And it was on a documentary called Black is the New Black. And the follow-up, which is called They Gotta Have Us, is actually now on Netflix. Okay. And it's a Talking Heads documentary where it's about a gentleman called Simon Fredericks, who does photography for the National Portrait Gallery. He has interviewed certain individuals, and the lens they're looking through is actually then they're talking directly to the person at home. So the way how it's being shot is not in your typical documentary style. Yeah. It then makes you feel like that person has feel comfortable, they've unveiled themselves, and they're sharing directly with you their own narrative. So you've got people like Naomi Campbell on there speaking in a way that you would never have heard her speak before. So it's just being able to be on projects like that, and then what can I do next to try and elevate and push the record label and music. So at the moment, theatre production and TV documentaries, I've had a lot more success and adventures down that road. And now I'm focusing more on building the brand for the label. I want to sign some new artists and start building a whole, cohort of artists and on a roster and releasing their work.
Nice one, man. So we'll definitely give that some plugs in that. So obviously we're in this age right now where we're dealing with COVID-19. Everyone's on lockdown. You got your COVID beard going on there. I mean, everyone's
shaped.
Everyone, there's loads of like no trim challenges and all that kind of stuff. I mean, how have you been coping generally with this pandemic?
It's weird. It's weird. So obviously it's sad because, people are falling sick and some people are not recovering and dying. And that part I find really, really sad. I think for me mentally, it's the mental challenges that I've observed that people are going through, that I think is the one that's going to be the hardest to recover from. Like if someone's got the learnt behavior of going outside X amount of times a day. And now if you actually follow the government rulings, which is if it's not essentials, don't go to the shop. One form of exercise per household for a maximum of an hour a day. If people are sticking to that, and then in the future they start to lift the lockdown restrictions, some people are going to really struggle mentally to kind of get back into a pattern. So, you know, I left the house to go to work for the first time in 4 weeks, and that was weird. It was like the night before I couldn't sleep. I felt like I was starting a new job. So you have those night nerves, and then leaving the house and having that freedom, it does change the way how you view things. And I don't know, I feel like it will also change the way how we view things in the media as well, because there's so much misinformation being put out there. It's so hard to know where to find an actual definitive line. I don't like to say the truth, because one thing I will say is that when you do have any form of pandemic, historically, it does take a while for them to find an actual cure. It's not Hollywood. You're not going to find it within 24 hours like they might do in the movies. It's something completely different, and I think it's going to require a bit of sense and sensibility from members of the public. So on that side, I think it's that's going to be some of the major challenges. On the other side, because I'm always busy, I find that this time has allowed me to chomp through a to-do list that I've always had. And it's made me realize how important it is to spend time championing yourself as well, and not relying on other individuals to push you to do things that you need to do, because you actually do have the time to do it. London is one of the most busiest cities in the world, and we can become so absorbed in stuff that we forget about your mental state, your physical state, your creative well-being, your family, just loads of different things. So hopefully everyone comes through it a bit stronger. And yeah, I don't know how long it's going to be like this, but it's definitely going to change the way how we view things in the industry, for sure.
What have you been doing to support your well-being?
This music. Music and exercise, going for walks when I have that 1 hour. If I don't need anything from the shop, just going for walks, checking in with friends and family, reading, just trying to and not watch too much news. I find that if anything more than half an hour a day it's way over the top right now. You're just gonna, it's not good for, even on the news, one of the news channels, they stated that watching the news for more than half an hour a day is not good for your mental well-being. So just trying to find a little bit of balance. But I'm finding that the lockdown restrictions is hard for me physically, but that's going to be like that for everyone. And then, yeah, that's it. The Hollywood body is on the shelf until next year.
So what have you missed? Is there anything that you've missed during lockdown?
Just seeing my family, really, to be honest. I don't miss the packed trains. I don't miss the hustle and bustle of loads of cars on the street. I like the fact that the skies are clearer. It's so hard because it's like on the nature side, I love it more. The fact that there's less of everything. But at this, I haven't really. I've missed being able to go to the main studio, but that's about it. To be honest, I think because I'm more involved in my creativity. I'm not relying on things like going to the pub. That's not something that's a deal breaker for me. Or at first I was like, I'm going to miss football, and then after 3 weeks, it was like I don't miss it. So yeah.
Nice one, man. The time for the plugs, really. Like, where could people that are not familiar with you as an artist or your music, throw out all your social media and where people can find out what you're doing, what's going on for Max Cyrus Music.
Okay, so for myself, it would be @_ Max Cyrus, MAXCYRUS, and that would be for the main Instagram, which will show the journey with me doing like news reviews for the BBC on Sundays, or just like my own projects of what I'm working on. And for the record label, it would be Max Cyrus Music, and that will be for all platforms. Max Cyrus Music will take you to the Instagram, the Facebook page, Twitter, and then it's Max Cyrus for the Spotify, which is just being built now. That all the tracks are just being uploaded now. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
Wicked, man. Wicked.
Cool.
Wicked. So basically, thank you, Max, man, for joining us and taking part in this edition of Duffus Meets, the showcase. It's been really good and really informative. We'll have some of your links. We'll put your links on underneath this video so people
can nice
it and stuff like that.
Nice.
But,
thank you.
Thanks for taking part. Yeah.
Thank you.